Hey there, and welcome to Tales by June, where hearts break, heal, and sometimes seek revenge. Let's begin today's story.
Hey, before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. I remember the cold first. It wrapped around my bones like chains, tightening with every shallow breath. The hospital room was dim, sterile, quiet, except for the faint beeping of machines, a cruel reminder that I was still alive. Barely. I lay there, alone, my body frail and hooked to wires, my fingers trembling as they rested on my chest. The nurse hadn't come in for hours. No flowers, no visitors, no tears, except mine. I had hoped, foolishly, that maybe he would show up. Ethan, my husband, my tormentor, the man I had loved with every fiber of my being, and the man who never once looked at me like I mattered. He was forced to marry me. I knew that. His parents liked me, thought I was the good girl from a respectable family, a quiet match for their golden boy. But Ethan never hid how much he despised the arrangement. He made it his mission to make sure I knew. Every day was a slow erosion of my soul. His cold shoulders, his harsh words, the subtle humiliation at family dinners, and worst of all, the ghost of her always lingering between us. Hannah. His true love. His obsession. The woman he left me for. And now they were married. I watched their wedding on my cracked phone screen from this very hospital bed. My heart had already given up long before my body did. I was nothing but a breathing shell of pain and regret. The final breath came quietly, without drama. I felt the machines fade, the cold deepen, my limbs grow weightless. I remember whispering one last wish as darkness closed in. If I could just go back, I'd never love him again. I gasped awake, lungs heaving like I had surfaced from deep underwater. Sweat soaked my skin. I jolted upright in bed, clutching the sheets, my heart pounding. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming, still dying. But this wasn't the hospital. This was my old bedroom, soft, familiar, sunlight streaming through the window, casting golden rays on the pale lavender curtains I'd picked out 2 years ago. I stumbled to my feet, heart racing. My legs didn't ache, my hands didn't tremble. There were no IV lines, no machines, no smell of antiseptic. "What the hell?" I whispered, rushing to the mirror. My face. Younger. Fuller. No dark circles. No signs of the torment I had endured. I blinked and stepped back, breath catching in my throat. It wasn't a dream. It couldn't be. I spun around, grabbed my phone, an older model. The lock screen blinked to life. August 8th. My wedding was scheduled for August 15th. I was alive. I was here. A week before the beginning of my end. I dropped the phone, falling to my knees, hands over my mouth as tears poured freely. Not the broken, tired sobs of my final days, but the desperate, guttural cries of someone who had been thrown a lifeline from hell. I was back. I had a chance. And this time I wasn't going to beg for love. "Mom, Dad!" I cried, bursting down the stairs barefoot like a madwoman. The smell of pancakes hit me first, warm, buttery, sweet. I skidded into the kitchen. And there they were. My parents. Alive. Laughing. My mother stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, humming an old love song. My father sat at the table, reading the newspaper, glasses sliding down his nose. "Good morning, sunshine!" Mom turned, grinning. "You're up early for once." I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled. "Honey?" Dad stood up, startled. I ran into their arms without a word, clutching them so tightly I could barely contain my sobs. I buried my face into my mother's shoulder, breathing in her lavender perfume. "You're here. You're here." "Of course we are," she said gently, brushing my hair from my face. "What's gotten into you?" But I couldn't speak, because in my last life they had died. Miserably. Alone. Cast aside by Ethan's manipulation and cruelty. Once I was gone, he ensured they were silenced, cut off, blamed for everything that went wrong in his life. I had left them behind, and they suffered because of me. But not this time. This time I would protect them. I would protect myself. And Ethan could go to hell. Later that day, I sat in my old room, curled up with my journal on my lap. I listed everything I remembered. Dates, conversations, red flags, Hannah's number, Ethan's betrayal timeline, even the bank accounts he hid, the lies he told my parents. Every detail came back with painful clarity. I couldn't stop the tears, but this time they weren't for the love I had lost. They were for the woman I used to be, the woman who begged for scraps of affection. who gave everything to a man who gave her nothing. She was dead, and I wasn't going to bring her back. The dress I wore was simple, but it fit me like armor. A soft ivory midi gown, elegant and poised. No frills, no sparkle, just a clean silhouette that whispered strength, not desperation. My hair was swept back in a low bun, exposing my face. My eyes, no longer searching for love, were sharp, calm, and prepared for war. Tonight was the engagement dinner Ethan's parents were hosting at their family estate, a pre-wedding celebration. In my past life, it had been the evening that sealed my humiliation. Hannah had shown up by accident in a red silk dress, pretending to be there to return something Ethan forgot. What she really did was plant seeds, twist a few words, make it look like I was jealous, obsessive. And Ethan, he played right into it. Humiliated me in front of everyone, laughed with his friends when I left crying. But this time, I wasn't the same girl. The mansion gleamed under chandeliers and soft candlelight. The garden strung with fairy lights like stars had fallen from the sky. A soft jazz band played by the patio. Everything was pristine, elegant, cold. I stepped in with my parents, holding their hands like I was walking into battle with my army. We were greeted by Mrs. Whitmore, Ethan's mother. Her smile was tight, brittle around the edges. "Darling, you look beautiful. Ethan will be thrilled." I smiled back, the perfect mask. "Oh, I'm sure he will." I searched the crowd for Ethan's father, stern, aloof, the man who had once told me quietly at dinner that marrying Ethan would tame him. He didn't know he was feeding a lion to a snake. I took a breath, bracing myself. I needed to talk to them before Ethan arrived. I was going to stop this train wreck before it derailed again, but fate wasn't going to make it that easy. A hush fell over the room. Murmurs. I turned just in time to see them step in. Ethan and Hannah. He looked smug, tailored suit, hair slicked back, flashing that half smile that used to make my heart race. Hannah clung to his arm like a trophy, wearing that same damn red dress, like she couldn't resist the drama of a repeat performance. My stomach twisted, not from fear, from rage. In the past, this was where I had smiled nervously, tried to laugh it off, and failed. I had crumbled under the weight of their performance. Not this time. "Oh my God," Hannah gasped, faking a stumble as they reached the center of the room. "I didn't know it was tonight. I just came by to drop off Ethan's cufflinks. I swear, I had no idea." The room tensed. Eyes turned to me. I could feel it happening again. The scene was almost identical. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "She's always clumsy," he said, as if that excused everything. Then she turned to me, her voice sweet venom. "Hope you don't mind. I didn't mean to interrupt your big moment." The exact line, word for word. I looked at her, then at Ethan, and then I laughed, a soft, unexpected sound that made both of them freeze. "Mind?" I repeated, taking a step forward. "No, Hannah, I don't mind at all. In fact, I was just waiting for the right moment to speak." Ethan frowned. "Speak about what?" The guests watched, some uncomfortable, some curious, most already feeding off the tension like vultures circling a meal. I turned to his parents, my voice clear and strong. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I want to thank you for everything you've done so far. The planning, the support, the invitations." I paused, smiled. "But I'm here to tell you that the wedding is officially canceled." Gasps. Murmurs. A glass clinked to the floor somewhere behind me. Ethan stepped forward. "What the hell are you talking about?" I repeated slowly, turning to face him. "The wedding is off. I'm calling it. Effective immediately." He laughed, the same mocking tone he used when he wanted to feel powerful. "Is this because of her? God, you're so insecure." "No, Ethan," I cut in, calm and unshaken. "This is because I finally see you for who you are." The room was silent. "And I don't love you anymore," his smirk faltered. "You don't get to cheat, manipulate, and humiliate me and then expect me to play the perfect bride. Not anymore. I've wasted enough time trying to earn love from someone who only knows how to take and destroy. So congratulations, you can have each other." I looked Hannah dead in the eye. "And good luck keeping him. You'll need it." I turned to the stunned crowd, lifted my glass with effortless grace. "To new beginnings." Then I set it down, looped my arms through my mother's and father's, and walked out. Head high, shoulders back, heart finally free. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. I paused at the car, looking up at the stars. My mother touched my cheek. "Are you all right?" I smiled, truly smiled for the first time in what felt like lifetimes. I've never been better. My father opened the car door. Where to now, sweetheart? I looked down at my phone. I already had a name in mind, a social media handle, a plan, a dream I buried long ago while playing house with a man who saw me as nothing but a burden. Home first, I said, and then we start over. That night, after the engagement party, sleep didn't come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom as the world outside drifted into silence. But inside me, everything screamed. Pain doesn't just disappear when you come back from the dead. It lingers in your bones. It flashes behind your eyelids like lightning on a stormy night. And sometimes it crawls back in, pulling you into the memories you tried to bury. And I remembered. God, I remembered everything. My wedding day. The day I had waited for with trembling hope. In the mirror, I had looked like a dream, lace veil, soft makeup, trembling lips. My heart beat with nervous excitement. I still believed then. I still thought maybe, just maybe, Ethan would change. He hadn't looked at me once during the ceremony, not even when he said, I do. His jaw was clenched, his eyes cold. I could see it in his posture, in the way he barely touched my hand, in the way he smiled at everyone but me. I stood next to him in front of our friends and families, my fingers laced with his, and realized I was marrying a man who hated me. Our wedding night. There was no tenderness, no affection, no privacy. Instead, his friends came over. Loud, drunk, obnoxious. Ethan had invited them to celebrate. Hannah was there too. Of course she was. You got stuck with the wrong girl, man. One of them laughed, clapping him on the back as I stood quietly by the kitchen door. Should have fought harder for Hannah. Ethan chuckled, not denying it. Too late now. They used me like a maid. More drinks. Where's the food? She's quiet, huh? A little mouse for a wife. I brought snacks and cleaned glasses while they laughed, while Hannah smirked from the couch, swirling wine in her hand like she owned the place. No one noticed the bride had tears in her eyes. No one cared. Not even him. The days that followed were worse. Ethan didn't come home most nights. When he did, it was only to throw accusations. You told my parents lies to trap me. You're pathetic. Don't expect love from me. I tried. I cooked his favorite meals. I wore the dresses he liked. I stayed quiet. I stayed kind. I swallowed every insult like a bitter pill, thinking someday he might see my worth. But he didn't. He never would. I remembered his parents too, especially his mother. She looked at me with pity, not warmth. She knew what was happening, how her son treated me. But she was too afraid to speak up, too conditioned to believe that a woman should endure. His father avoided me altogether. Once, late at night, I overheard their argument in the hallway. You can't keep treating her like this, Ethan. She's not the one I wanted. Why don't you admit it was your choice, not mine? And now it's yours to fix. Then I'll fix it. I'll divorce her. The divorce came silently, but not before the final blow. The day Hannah visited the house. Ethan had invited her, knowing I'd be there. I walked into the living room and found them curled up on the couch, laughing like I was the intruder. You should leave, he told me flatly. Hannah stood, brushing invisible dust off her dress. Careful on the stairs, sweetie. Wouldn't want to trip. And she smiled. A second later, I did trip, but not by accident. She pushed me. I remember the pain, the sharp crack, the blood on the stairs. I remember the hospital, alone again, no visitors, no apology, just cold white sheets and the fading light. And then, the final insult. I saw their wedding photos on social media, 3 weeks after my death. Same venue, same people. Same smiles. Different bride. Ethan stood beside her, grinning like he finally had what he deserved. And me? I became a forgotten chapter, a shadow, a cautionary tale. I sat up, hugging my knees to my chest as the weight of it all pressed down on me. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't mourning. I was remembering. Because remembering meant I'd never let it happen again. Remembering meant I was alive. And I wasn't going to waste this second chance. I whispered to the dark room, you should have loved me when I was yours. Then I wiped my tears, stood tall, and looked at my reflection. Tomorrow, I'd begin again. Not for him. Not for revenge. For me. Ethan's laughter was hollow. It echoed through the corner booth of the dim bar, lost somewhere between the clinking glasses and loud music. His friends sat around him, guffawing, half drunk, retelling the same stories they always did. But he wasn't really there. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. He hadn't been himself since the engagement dinner, since I had walked out with a voice sharper than a blade and the grace of someone who had finally found her wings. He wouldn't admit it, not even to himself, but he'd expected tears. A breakdown. A last-minute change of heart. Not that. Not the version of me who stood tall, fearless, unrecognizable. "She's just acting," Hannah said again, draping herself over him like a second skin. "She's trying to get your attention. Classic manipulation. Honestly, you should be glad you're out of that mess." Ethan didn't reply. His friend Nate leaned forward, smirking. "Yeah, man. She probably thought walking out would make you come crawling. Reverse psychology, bro. Chicks do that." Another one chimed in. "She's nothing without the Whitmore name backing her. She'll come back begging once real life hits her." Hannah kissed Ethan's cheek. "She'll disappear. She always fades in the background eventually." But Ethan wasn't so sure, because the look in my eyes that night, that wasn't desperation. That was freedom, and it haunted him more than he cared to admit. Meanwhile, I was building something of my own. The next morning, sunlight flooded my room as I stared at the name printed across my laptop screen. Rise. Confidence. Content. Coaching. It was my brand. My business. In my past life, I had dreamed of launching a channel, something empowering, real, but Ethan had laughed at me. Influencers are just girls with too much free time. I had let that dream die once. Not again. Within a week, I launched my first video, a short, powerful reel on starting over without apologies. My voice was steady, my tone warm but fierce, my words pulled from wounds that had healed with fire. The video went viral in days. Comments poured in. Open quote, "I needed this today." "She's so real. So raw." Subscribed. "I feel seen." Close quote. My DMs were flooded with collaboration offers. Brands noticed, so did news outlets. I was invited to speak on panels about women's empowerment, starting over after trauma, confidence recovery. Within a month, I had a business email, a scheduler, a team of interns. I wasn't just living, I was rising. Then came the dinner. My college friends had planned a small reunion at a trendy rooftop restaurant downtown. I wore a sleek black jumpsuit, gold hoops, and my confidence like a second skin. We were laughing over shared memories and cocktails when I heard his voice. Ethan, and worse, Hannah, and all their cronies. I turned slowly, and there they were, at the far side of the restaurant, being loud, being seen. Just like always. Hannah spotted me first. She leaned into Ethan and whispered something, loud enough for her friends to giggle. I looked back at my table, ready to ignore them. But they didn't let me. Nate walked past on his way to the bar, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, wow," he said mockingly, loud enough for both tables to hear. "Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you were still crying somewhere in a yoga retreat." Chuckles followed. Hannah sipped her wine with smug amusement. Ethan just watched me, waiting. Maybe for a breakdown, a flinch, a sign that I was still weak. But I just smiled. I stood slowly, stepped forward with the elegance of a woman who no longer needed to explain herself. "I see some things never change," I said softly. "Still using your voices to fill the silence where your self-worth should be?" Nate blinked. Hannah's smile twitched. I tilted my head, looking straight at Ethan. "You thought I was a phase, a charity case. But I wasn't your lesson. I was your test, and you failed, miserably." My voice didn't shake. Not once. "You mock me, thinking I'm pretending like, but I'm not trying to be anything. I already am." I turned, walking back to my table, the click of my heels like punctuation to the silence they left behind. One of my friends whispered, "Damn, that was savage." I lifted my glass with a smile, "To letting the past watch you glow." We laughed, and I didn't look back, but Ethan did. His eyes stayed on me the whole night, watching the girl he discarded become the woman he could never touch again. The headlines hit social media like wildfire. Ethan Whitmore and Hannah Ray announced their wedding date. From lovers to newlyweds, inside their fairy tale romance. The second time's the charm, Whitmore heir finally weds his first love. Fairy tale. What a joke. I sat at my desk reading the headline while sipping my morning tea. My phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, distant acquaintances, even fans tagging me in the announcement like it was breaking news in my life. It wasn't. If anything, it felt like reading a news article about two strangers. I knew the reality behind their polished smiles. I knew what that love story cost. and I knew what was coming. But I also knew it wasn't my story anymore. Ethan's parents looked exhausted. They stood stiffly in the engagement photos posted online, their smiles visibly strained. His father had aged in months, lines etched deep across his forehead. His mother looked hollow, hands folded in front of her like she was bracing herself for impact. In private, I knew they had begged him not to do it. I remembered it from my past life, and I could see it now too, their fear of what Hannah truly was. But Ethan had always been blinded by her, by ego, by obsession. And Hannah? She wasn't marrying for love. She was marrying for the name, the spotlight, the title she believed I stole the first time. And this time, there was no me in the way. Let them have their big day, because while they planned a wedding, I was building an empire. My face was everywhere now, not on gossip blogs or wedding magazines, but in places that mattered. Podcasts, business journals, interviews. My channel, Rise, had crossed 1 million followers in less than 2 months. My first online masterclass on healing after emotional abuse sold out in 4 hours. I launched a podcast. I partnered with brands focused on women's wellness, emotional independence, financial literacy. People didn't just watch me, they believed in me. I became a voice for women who had been silenced, a guide for those learning to live again. I was invited to keynote conferences. I flew to LA for interviews. I was no longer the girl who got dumped. I was the woman who rose from ashes and taught others how to burn brighter, not bitter. One morning, I opened my inbox and froze. Subject, feature opportunity, Time Women of Influence issue. I blinked, reread it, then read it again. They wanted to feature me, the girl who once cried alone in a hospital bed, abandoned and discarded. I laughed through the tears as my assistant walked in, startled. I think I just made it, I whispered. She grinned. No, you earned it. Meanwhile, Ethan's wedding preparations were a disaster behind closed doors. Vendors complained about Hannah's tantrums. His parents footed the bill with gritted teeth. The guest list was shrinking. Rumors floated in their social circle about Hannah's spending, her control, her temper. But the press didn't know. Not yet. They still played pretend. They still wore the masks. And somewhere in his glass and marble penthouse, Ethan sat alone more often than not. He watched my videos, silently, sometimes at night, sometimes twice in a row. He never liked or commented, but I knew he was watching. I knew I lived rent-free in his memory, because when someone throws away gold, they spend their life regretting the shine. One evening, my parents joined me for dinner. My mother looked at me over roasted vegetables and smiled softly. He's getting married. I know, I replied, pouring wine into her glass. She paused. Do you feel anything? I thought about it, about everything I had survived, about the girl I once was, about the woman I had become. I feel grateful, I said finally. Grateful? My dad echoed, confused. Yes, I said, smiling, because if he hadn't broken me, I'd still be begging for love. Now, I am love. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. My father lifted his glass to rebirth. To rising, my mother added, and I raised mine. To freedom. Moving to New York was like exhaling after holding my breath for years. The city welcomed me with noise, rhythm, and unapologetic chaos. I traded the ghosts of my old life for the sound of cab horns and the smell of street food. I signed a lease on a sunlit loft near the Hudson, where I painted the walls myself and furnished it with warm wood, clean lines, and pieces that reflected me, not what someone else expected me to be. And most importantly, I started living. Fully, loudly, without shame. That's where I met Liam. We were introduced by a mutual friend at a podcast event. He was the featured guest, a mental health counselor who ran a nonprofit that provided therapy to survivors of domestic abuse. He was tall, quiet, the kind of man who didn't need to take up space to feel strong. He listened more than he spoke. He noticed little things. The way I rubbed my thumb when I got nervous, the way I went quiet before I spoke something vulnerable. He didn't chase me. He walked beside me. No demands, no pressure, no masks, just presence. It terrified me at first. Real affection always feels suspicious after you've lived in a storm of manipulation. But Liam wasn't a storm. He was the calm after, and slowly, piece by piece, he taught me how to love again. Meanwhile, Ethan's perfect married life was cracking. His wedding had been a media circus, lavish, showy, cold. They sold exclusive photos to tabloids. Hannah posed like royalty. her smile rehearsed in every shot. But behind the filtered images and power couple hashtags, reality painted a different story. Rumors began to surface about fights, financial tension, Hannah's growing obsession with controlling Ethan's life, his contacts, his calendar, even his parents. Ethan's father started spending more time at the golf club. His mother stopped speaking at parties. Friends whispered that Hannah had a screaming match at a restaurant that made their waiter cry. Ethan, the man who once laughed at my tears, was now haunted by silence. One crisp fall evening, Liam and I were invited to a high-profile charity gala, a black tie event supporting women's mental health initiatives. My nonprofit had partnered with them, and I was honored as one of the keynote speakers. The venue sparkled. Marble floors, chandeliers, a string quartet. I wore an emerald satin gown, soft waves in my hair, a minimal gold necklace at my collarbone. Liam stood beside me in a classic black tux, his hand gently resting on the small of my back. I felt powerful, whole, seen. We were sipping champagne when a hush rolled through the crowd. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore have arrived," someone whispered. I turned, and there they were. Ethan in a navy tux, looking thinner, colder. Hannah in a glimmering red gown, her arm looped tightly through his. Her smile was too wide, her body too stiff. They hadn't changed. They had just wilted prettier. Our eyes met. Ethan's and mine. He blinked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't flinch. I simply turned back to Liam and smiled at something he whispered. Something sweet and unrelated, like the world hadn't just tilted. But of course, Hannah couldn't resist. She sauntered over during the silent auction. "Oh my God," she said dramatically, looking me up and down. "You clean up so well. It's nice to see you doing okay." I didn't even bother responding. She glanced at Liam, then leaned in slightly. "This your new boyfriend? Cute. A little quiet, but I guess we can't all marry heirs, can we?" Liam simply smiled, his voice cool and calm. "It's nice to meet you. I've heard absolutely nothing about you." That shut her up, momentarily. But she recovered quickly. "Well," she said with fake sweetness, "some of us are just lucky. Mrs. Ethan Whitmore has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" I turned to her finally, looked her dead in the eye, and I said gently, "Rings don't mean much when you have to choke on them to make them fit." Her smile faltered. Behind her, Ethan's parents watched in stiff silence. His mother flushed with shame. His father looked away entirely. I didn't wait for a reaction. I simply turned to Liam, took his hand, and walked away. Later that night, under the glowing string lights outside the venue, Liam kissed my forehead. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. More than okay. Because the truth was, facing them again didn't hurt. It didn't sting. It only reminded me how far I'd come, and how small their world still was. Ethan married the woman he once destroyed me for, but I had rebuilt a world that didn't include him. And that was the real win. It started with a message from an unknown number. "Please, just one meeting. I'll come alone. I need to talk." I stared at the screen, my stomach sinking. The number was new, but the words, the tone, the silence between them. It was Ethan. I hadn't heard from him since the charity gala, not directly. I assumed he would spiral in his own world of glass walls and illusions, but here he was, begging for a meeting. I didn't answer for hours. My heart warred with my head. But curiosity is cruel, and sometimes unfinished chapters don't stay shut. So I agreed. 1 hour. A public cafe. Nothing more. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting at a corner table near the window, pale and still, he looked nothing like the man I once knew. No arrogance, no easy charm, just haunted silence. He stood when I approached, and for a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Gratitude, relief, maybe fear. "Thank you," he said quietly, motioning to the chair across from him. I sat slowly, keeping my guard high. He looked thinner, older, like someone who had just come back from war. "I had an accident," he said after a pause. Last week, my car flipped. They said I was lucky to survive." I nodded, neutral. I heard. "They said I was unconscious for a day," he went on, voice low, "but I wasn't. Not exactly. I woke up." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. "I remember everything." The world tilted. "I remember the past, the other life, all of it," he whispered. "You died, alone, in that hospital. I married Hannah. She and Nate, my best friend, had been cheating the whole time. What? They tried to kill me. 3 times. My hands froze around my coffee. "What?" He nodded, eyes wide and wet. "The first time, They pushed me down the stairs. I survived, but broke my spine. I was bedridden, paralyzed. They were so good at pretending, at faking sympathy. But once they thought I couldn't speak or move. His voice cracked. They didn't hide anymore. He swallowed hard, fists clenched. I heard them, saw them. She would sit by my bed and mock me. Nate would laugh about how easy it had been to manipulate me. How they planned to keep me alive just long enough to gain access to everything. My stomach churned. I didn't speak. I wanted to scream, to beg, to apologize to you, to say everything I should have said before, but I couldn't move. Couldn't even blink. I stared at him, unable to reconcile this broken, guilt-ridden man with the Ethan I once knew, the one who used to tear me apart without blinking. And then, the third attempt, he said quietly. The night they poisoned me. It was quiet, quick. The last thing I remember was the taste of the tea Hannah made. He took a shaky breath, and when I woke up, it was before everything. Like you, I was reborn. My breath caught in my throat. He knew. He knew. You remember me dying? He nodded. I remember holding your cold hand in the hospital, and then walking away to marry the woman who would kill me. He looked up at me, his voice raw. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like incense, heavy, slow-burning, painful. I know what I did to you. I treated you like nothing. I laughed while you bled for me, and I don't deserve your help. I probably don't even deserve forgiveness. He leaned back, eyes glassy. But I need it. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not trying to fix what I broke. I need someone to believe me, to help me stop it, because they've already started again. I blinked. What do you mean? They've already made attempt number 1, he whispered. They tried to cut the brakes in my car. I caught it just in time. And I know what comes next. The staircase, the hospital, the poison. It's repeating. Chills covered my arms. Ethan sat still, small in his silence. I spent a lifetime destroying you, he said, and now somehow you're the only person who knows I'm telling the truth. I sat back in my chair. The cafe buzzed around us, clinking spoons, quiet jazz, warm pastries. But in my head, everything was quiet. How could the man who ruined me be the one now begging me to save him? Was it karma? Was it fate? Was it justice? I didn't know, but I looked into his eyes and saw something I never expected. Fear, real, raw, human fear. I'll help you, I said finally. His eyes widened. But this isn't about second chances, Ethan, I added. This isn't love. This isn't redemption. This is survival for both of us. He nodded slowly, chest rising and falling in relief. Was, thank you, he whispered. I stood to leave. For now, stay away from Hannah, I said. And Nate, don't confront them. Don't show your hand. We're going to play this smart, quiet. He looked up at me like I was his last lifeline, and maybe I was, but I was no longer the girl who needed saving. Now, I was the one who knew how to fight. The first step to dismantling evil, let them feel safe. So we waited. I coordinated with Ethan in secret, using encrypted emails, burner phones, and scheduled check-ins from anonymous accounts. Not because I trusted him, but because I trusted myself now, and I knew how to play the long game. Ethan moved back into the guest house on his family's estate under the guise of needing space after the accident. Hannah played the dutiful wife in public, smiling, posing, posting. But in private, she grew impatient and sloppy. Nate, Ethan's former best friend, visited often. Too often. Their touches, their glances, weren't subtle anymore. Ethan installed hidden cameras. I reviewed every second of footage. And soon enough, we had it. The first recorded conversation between Hannah and Nate. No masks, no sugarcoating, discussing Ethan like he was already dead. You should have cut the brake lines better, Nate snapped in the video, pacing by the window. It wasn't my fault, Hannah hissed. He's like a cockroach, won't die even when you squash him. Well, second time's the charm. The stairs next week. We'll say he slipped again, just like before. My blood ran cold, but I didn't shake. Instead, I uploaded it to a private server. I edited the footage, added subtitles, a timestamp, then built a digital trail that couldn't be denied. But we needed one more thing. Motive. That came 2 days later. Hidden in Ethan's locked safe, the one Hannah didn't know he remembered the code to, were forged documents. Power of attorney, transfer of estate, stock access, all to her name, signed while Ethan had been unconscious in their past life, and once again prepared here. She was preparing to make her move, and this time he'd be conscious for it. We went to the police. Quietly. An old contact of mine, Detective Martinez, who had followed my rise online, agreed to open a discreet investigation. "When we move," she warned, "we go all the way. No mistakes." I nodded. I want her to fall publicly. And so, I helped plan her stage. 2 weeks later, Ethan and Hannah hosted a charity ball for mental health recovery, playing their game of glossy PR. Cameras rolled. Paparazzi crowded the entrance. Hannah glittered in diamonds, pretending to be a loving wife and visionary. I watched from a private suite, dressed in black, eyes fixed on the ballroom floor below. The moment the clock struck 9 p.m., I sent one link, one upload, to the media, the sponsors, the guests, the video. The screens in the ballroom flickered. Confused murmurs rose, and then the footage played. Clear audio, subtitled, undeniable. "He's like a cockroach, won't die even when you squash him." Gasps, screams, silence. Hannah's smile froze. Nate, standing across the room, went pale. Ethan, calm and quiet, watched them both. Within minutes, sirens lit up the venue. Detectives swept in. Hannah tried to run. She didn't make it 3 steps. Nate swung at one of the officers and was pinned to the floor. And Ethan's mother, stunned but finally seen, simply whispered, "It's over." The next day, it was everywhere. Breaking. Heiress Hannah Ray and Nate Granger arrested for attempted murder conspiracy. Watch chilling footage of their plot to kill Ethan Whitmore. The fall of the perfect couple. I didn't speak to reporters. I didn't release a statement. I let the truth speak for itself. But in the quiet of my apartment, Liam brought me coffee and pulled me into his arms. "You did it," he whispered. I rested my head on his shoulder. We did. Because even though I walked through fire alone, this time, I wasn't alone anymore. Ethan called 2 days later, not to plead, not to reconnect, but simply to say thank you. "I didn't deserve your help," he added, voice shaking. "But I'll spend the rest of this life making sure no one else suffers because I was blind." I paused. "You were never blind, Ethan. You just chose to look away." He didn't argue. "Are we even?" he asked softly. I smiled. "I forgave you the day I realized I didn't need your apology anymore." And then I hung up. That night, I walked onto a stage to speak at a women's empowerment summit. Flashes clicked, applause roared, and I stood there in front of a crowd that once would have intimidated me and said, "I was once discarded, forgotten, mocked, I died unloved, but I came back not to beg for a different ending. I came back to write one." The crowd stood for me, and somewhere in the back of the room, Liam's eyes were full of tears.